Despite years of working to achieve convergence between IFRS and GAAP, there's still striking differences. Here to shed insight, Chicago Booth professor Dr. Ray Ball. Investors essentially have to become financially bilingual in the U.S., right? Especially when they're dealing with multi-jurisdictional issues. Do you think in the long run, as we continue to engage, with these two different systems, they could lose out?
I think the losers on in relation to cross-border transacting are the mums and dads who might want to invest their money overseas and who find it difficult to understand more than one language financially. I think they're the people who would lose out. The professionals, I don't think it's a big deal for them.
Well, it's going to keep the lawyers employed as they, make those deals and write those contracts. But from the investor's perspective, let's go back to that. In a practical way, how are they supposed to assess any given opportunity put before them?
Yes, it's difficult. It's like any language. If you are a native English speaker and you go to a foreign country, you feel at a disadvantage in just dealing with people in restaurants or whatever. By analogy, if you are a person who knows the financial language and concepts of the United States, you now have to deal with the financial statements of a foreign entity, you are at a disadvantage.
Now, there has been so much focus placed on the differences between GAAP and IFRS, right? Let's talk about some of the similarities and how far we actually have come in terms of, striking an accord.
Well, there's enormous common basis. Ever since the International Accounting Standards Board was established as the International Accounting Standards Committee, it's been based here in London. It's had a perspective that has been much influenced by English and American accounting. The notion of high transparency, high quality financial reporting, oriented more towards investors and less towards managers. So they share that in common as a basic framework. They also share an enormous number of the standards in common. Yes, there are definitely some differences. The differences, interestingly, tend to be within a particular standard, where there are a lot of similarities within that standard as well. But the major differences that have emerged are, I think, in relation to the different political pressures upon American standard setters than on the International Accounting Standards Board, who set international standards. But yes, they share an enormous amount in common.
Okay. Now, we have TTIP. It's a raging debate here in Europe right now. Tell me about how it could help advance these conversations.
The Trans-Pacific, I think any free trade agreement is a very good idea. There are adjustment costs in the short term because people orient their activities to the assumption that they have different tariff and other support structures, but when they go away, there are adjustment costs. I think in the long term, the evidence is that trade agreements are beneficial.
Do you think they'll in any way influence the conversations around harmonizing accounting standards on both sides of the Atlantic?
In the following sense, the fundamental causes of globalization in accounting actually are globalization in markets and in politics. If you compare the world now with the world even several decades ago, in terms of politics, we now know more about each other's activities. You get the integration of politics in the European Union. In terms of globalization of trade, you get more cross-border transacting. That's the underlying economic and political forces that create a demand for globalization in financial reporting. Trade deals increase the amount of global trade, and they increase the demand for there being a global financial language to conduct that trade in.